Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is James Gregoire. I represent Fairfield, Fletcher, Bakersfield. I'm the delegation chair, which in legislative terms doesn't mean you're in charge. It means you're the secretary. But we're going to go over just what we're going to do today, so everybody has the agenda, and then we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll jump into it. So the way we're going to start is that we'll just go down through 2 to 3 minutes, introduce ourselves. We're going to tell you what committee we're on, where we represent, obviously our names, probably not obvious, but we are going to tell you our names. Briefly what we're doing, it's early in the session, so we're not getting into the super weeds yet. Then we're going to, after that, we're going to open it up to regular citizens to talk. So if you're a citizen, not part of an organization, you'll get to talk. And at the end, we're going to reserve time for organizations, like my good friend. Except you got something for today, right? All right. So, but we learned over the years that if we don't have a format, then it just becomes a free-for-all. We like to be very organized. Ground rules, which have not been a problem for years, but it has happened. Civil, just be civil. It's not a debate. We're here to listen to you primarily. We're going to give you our overview. We want to hear what you have to say. We're not going to get into tit for tat and anything like that. So, having said that, I don't even know what the flag is. We're going out.
Right here.
Right there. Randy has a flag. So we'll do Pledge Allegiance to the flag, and then we'll start. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So we'll just start down here with my dear friend, and she'll introduce herself, and we'll go down through.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to see you all here. My name is Carolyn Brannigan. I live in the town of Georgia, where I've lived my entire life. I represent Georgia in the House of Representatives and also the town of Fairfax, which is our neighboring community. This is my 21st year in the State House. I did take some time off. I'd have more than that if I didn't take 4 years off, but I did, and now I'm back in the House. Most of those 21 years I've served on the Ways and Means Committee, which is where I am this session also. The Ways and Means Committee is the committee that deals with revenue, all kinds of money that comes into the state, like taxes and fees and estates. Sometimes people die with no people to inherit the estate, so it goes to the state, so we deal with all that. All kinds of revenue. I think there are 11 people this year on our committee, and many of them are new to Ways and Means, and 3 of them are new to the State House. So we have spent the first 4 weeks of the session doing what I call Ways and Means 101. We review what a tax looks like, what a tax base is, a tax rate, and how you can play with both of those factors and others to regulate the amount of money that you take in. We also look deeply into who can afford it and who can't. And so we've been spending quite a bit of time on that. And so I want to give you my email address before I stop talking, because I'll forget it if I don't give it to you now. It's cbrannigan, BRANAGAN, @ledge.state.vt.us. In fact, that @ledge.state.vt.us is all of our address. So it's our first initial and our last name, and then at VT, ledge.state. So, welcome again.
Thank you so much. As I said earlier, my name is James Gregoire. I represent Fairfield, Fletcher, and Bakersfield. I spent 6 years on Human Services. I just got moved down to Correction and Institutions, where I'm the vice chair. Corrections and Institutions deals with state buildings, maintenance, etc., and the correctional institutions. So far this year, we've basically received a primer for our new members and updates for previous members to get us up to speed on what's happened with the capital bill, with state projects, etc. And next week we'll start, after the governor's budget, dealing with the new asks.
I'm Randy Brock. I was first elected to the Senate representing Franklin County and the town of Alburgh in Grand Isle County in 2008, and before that, I was Vermont State Auditor. I sit on the Finance Committee, which is the counterpart to the House Ways and Means Committee. They start and we fix on all bills related to spending money and finance and to taxation. I also sit on the Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs Committee. These two committees are really important for the big things that we have to do this year in the General Assembly. We heard a lot from the election about taxation. We heard a lot about education funding. We heard a lot about property taxes. That's the Finance Committee on the one hand in terms of just dealing with that taxation issue, and we've already started. We've taken a lot of testimony. We've heard a lot from both the education establishment in terms of the changes that they propose to make from the administration's perspective, and also from people who are concerned about high taxation of property taxes. We're focused, I believe, on trying to do something about that this year. In the Housing, Economic Development, Housing, General Affairs Committee, we're focused on housing. Housing is one of the critical needs that we have in Vermont to deal with this year, and it's something that we are committed to dealing with. I also sit on the committee that oversees internet technology, and that is a holdover from prior years. I've sat on it since the committee was formed. It's the Joint Information Technology Oversight Committee. Thank you very much.
I'm Joe Luna from Franklin 3, which is St. Albans City Wards 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm new. I'm actually the only one in the delegation who is. I am on Corrections and Institutions, which is a committee which James Gregoire vice chairs, and he described pretty well. The institutions piece, primarily but not entirely, is concerned with the maintenance and coordination of state building needs, which is primarily financed through bonded indebtedness. And it's a 2-year budget versus a 1-year budget, like most of the state of Vermont activity. The state has, in the last couple of years, made an effort to rely less on bonded indebtedness. So I believe the 2-year budget we're looking at will involve somewhere around $100 million of bond issuances versus $108 million in the last cycle. So looking forward to that process, which will go live after the governor presents the budget on Tuesday.
Good morning, I'm Representative Lisa Hango. I live in Berkshire and I represent Franklin 5, which is Highgate, Franklin, Berkshire, and Richford, along with Representative Wayne Rush, who is unable to be with us here today. I serve on the House Government Operations and Military Affairs Committee as Vice Chair, and I'm also a tripartisan co-chair of the National Guard and Veterans Affairs Caucus and the Vermont Rural Caucus. My committee has jurisdiction over state, local, county, and regional government, the administration of public safety, elections and reapportionments, liquor and lottery, cannabis, military affairs, and other related matters. We're currently taking testimony on the contested Bennington 1 election, and we're hearing introductory presentations from all of the agencies and organizations that we will be working with throughout the session.
Hi, I'm Lynn Dickinson. I represent 2/3 of St. Albans town. I've been there 16 years. I'm starting my 17th year. I've served on 4 committees. Commerce, primarily, but I also served on correction institutions, judiciary, and this is my 2nd session on appropriations. We are very fortunate in this county because we have 2 people on appropriations, myself and Wayne LaRush from Franklin, so that's unusual to have 2 people from one county like that. We are starting with the BAA, the Budget Adjustment Act. We've been listening to people come in and talk about what they want to do with their budgets. This is supposed to be a budget that right sizes whatever's already been spent versus what's needed or what's already left over and what we can do with that money halfway through the fiscal year. However, there are some people who use it as a budget tool, and they come in and they want more money to do everyday run-of-the-mill things as part of their fixed budgets, and we have discussions with them about that. We will be hearing the governor's budget on Tuesday, and we will be deciding, we haven't made a decision on the BAA yet, because we want to see what the governor's doing with his budget for 2026. Some of the things we're talking about may actually be in the big budget that's being proposed to us, and we can go and deal with that and not have it in the BAA. So we're still working on that issue. But we spend the money. They go and they figure out how to tax to get the money, but appropriation spends the money.
Yes, Alan DeMar, I represent Enosburg and Montgomery. I'm on the healthcare committee. This is my second term, and it's early in the season, so we haven't really put our feet to the ground yet, but we deal with healthcare affordability. This is going to be a big year dealing with the hospitals and providers and insurance companies. So we're going to have an active year, so thank you.
Good morning, Bob Norris. I'm one of two of your senators. This is my 5th year now. I sit on Senate Appropriations, and basically we're sitting here taking testimony, waiting for the House to send us over their recommendations so we can address it soon after the governor's address, obviously. My first year on appropriations, I have a lot to learn. This is quite an undertaking, but I asked for the committee. Unfortunately, I did receive that nomination. I also sit on Judiciary. This is my 5th year on Judiciary. I presently now Vice Chair Senate Judiciary, which I look forward to. We deal with judicial matters, legal matters, motor vehicle things, along with housing insurance, so on and so forth. So I feel much more comfortable in the role on the judicial board than I do presently with the appropriation, but I will learn that as we move forward. So thanks for being here. We look forward to questions.
Thank you. Before we move into dialogue, Lynn touched on something that's kind of important. So we have 2 people on appropriations in the House, which is pretty uncommon for a county, well, Franklin County. But we're also very fortunate because we have 5 vice chairs and a chair in the Senate and the House. So we have a lot more sway than we've had in the past. A lot of us serve on money committees, which also is a change from the past. Almost everybody up here, the majority, are on money committees. So we're very fortunate for that. So if you have a question or a comment, what we'd like you to do is to say your name and then ask your question, and I'll give it to the person who's most appropriate to answer. And who would like to go first? Go right over there.
I understand that you're...
Can you say your name first?
Oh,
please?
I'm sorry. Kim Watkins, St. Albans Town.
Thank you.
My understanding is that there's going to be obviously some budgetary considerations, and one of them is the Child Care Financial Assistance Program. And I'm just concerned because 50% of the workforce here in Franklin County is women. Many of them are sole providers for their family, and I'm just wondering how it is by cutting assistance for childcare is going to help make for those families affordable living.
Yeah. So I'm going to let Lynn talk about that in a second, but as one of the 2 presenters of that original bill, myself and Jessica Brumstead, something I care about very deeply. I know the governor does as well. I have a bill that will come out that addresses some changes that need to be, some tweaks that need to happen. But Lynn's going to explain that email that people got. She's going to go into the details about what's actually happening.
Yes, we had a blast that went out to people all across the state because of testimony that was given on appropriations last week, maybe even the week before. There is no cut to child care. Number 1, no cut at all. Basically, there's several things going on here at once. And as it works out, 2 of the numbers are identical. We established this to go into effect July 1. And there were projections made. There is no appropriation previous to that that we can use as a caseload reserve type of thing, because that's how you do it. You use the previous appropriation and you put aside money, 5%, and that's what we have with the Human Services Caseload Reserve, which is primarily used for Medicaid. It's got lots of money in it, and it is the way we adjust Medicaid between revenue and caseload increases or decreases, and that's what the reserve is there for. So childcare does not, the childcare fund does not have a reserve. As of Thursday or Friday last week, the finance management from Adam Gresham decided that we would use the Human Services Caseload Reserve as the caseload reserve for this money that we're dealing with childcare. There's two pieces to this. One is what we actually allocated, and I can go through this. There was a $50 million DCF base appropriation for this back in, for the 25 budget, which is we're in now, and a forecast of $75 million in revenue from the payroll tax, which goes into that fund. So the total CCFAP money was $129 million. After the July E-Board, which is just as this program was just getting started, the E-Board is the 4 chairs of the 4 money committees, appropriations and the tax committees. They meet in July, and they forecasted revenue from the payroll tax was increased to $92 million from the $79 million, which was a $13 million upgrade. Well, as it worked out, their projection for December was $23 million, but it came in at only $19 million by the end of December, which was a downgrade from their projection. Now, according to Tom Cavett, the economist that talked to us on Thursday, now at the end of January, almost the end of January, is now at $22.3 million, which they consider to be pretty close to that projection. So in the meantime, there was underutilization, which ended up being, by their projection, also a $13 million difference. So what the goal was, now, I don't need to tell you that DCF and the Agency of Human Services has huge needs. I mean, we never get enough money to be able to do all the things we do. So we have these 2 $13 million monies, and it was decided it would be put back into the general fund to be used for Agency of Human Services needs, DCF specifically. And the other $13 million, of course, was the underutilization. Now, at the same time that there might be projections of underutilization, let me see if this is the right one. Chris Winters, okay. The commissioner of DCF said that the state is now paying out more than twice as much in financial assistance on behalf of families accessing child care. It's reflecting more children enrolled and higher rates paid to programs. In June of 23, the state paid $4.8 million, and in December of 24, that number was $12.8 million, a 117% increase. Okay, this is the utilization that has gone up, all right? The number of children benefiting from CCFAP increased by 40%. Significant growth among infants and toddlers, which are the most expensive groups of people, infants that children that you can have. And in June of 23, 7,048 had CCFAP certificates. In December of 2024, 9,851 children had CCFAP certificates. This is an increase of 2,803 children. And so about 1,500 are in families whose incomes are in the newly eligible bands, about 350% of federal poverty level. So the utilization has gone up, maybe not as much as the projections, but it has gone up. And it is actually being successful. And these are actually, this isn't anecdotal, these are real facts. And the other thing is that now we're actually getting to where we are with the taxes. So one of the things that they know is that this money, they decided that considering this so-called cut, this is not a cut, it's just a way of reallocating the money, but they're now going to put that money into the Agency of Human Services Caseload Reserve. And it's got lots of money there, and so depending on what happens over the next 18 months, that money will be available to do the child care work and to adjust depending on the taxes and the utilization and stabilize it. Now, one of the things that they're doing is outreach. And I know if you watch TV, you probably have seen ads about the utilization. There's 2 types of outreach. One is to the people who are going to be eligible for the program, and they've been the ads on TV. The second thing is to get the outreach to the people who actually pay the taxes. So if you're using a payroll tax service, that's pretty straightforward. They will be able to do this new payroll tax without too much problem. But there's a lot of small employers that are just oblivious to this whole thing, have no idea. They may not find out about it until April. They may actually, in fact, not get the money in until October because you do extensions for taxes. So they really have no idea exactly how much money they're actually going to get. And it's going to take, they say, 18 months. But because we're putting it into what's already an existing Agency of Human Service Stabilization caseload reserve, there will be, they will be able to adjust and manage it. So that's what the reality is. We all got dozens of emails, all kinds of people concerned about it.
So thank you, Lynn. Can you, if I send you my address, can you just, whatever paper you're reading from,
Yeah, I
can
can
you
just
share
send
that
you
with
their
me?
stuff, yeah.
Okay, perfect. I'll send you my,
Yeah.
I'm
I
in your district,
heard
so.
told people over the weekend that I'd gotten emails from.
Okay.
And I couldn't reach any of them. But the point of it is this is sort of one of those glitches. Someone said, oh, we're moving this money and we're going back to the general fund. Well, that was not a cut.
Okay.
And it really is, they think it's gonna take 18 months before this even gets, where they have any idea of what kind of revenue they have and what kind of utilization they have. And then they'll be able to budget more appropriately. Because right now, all it is projections.
Okay,
Thank you. So that was a very detailed answer. Hopefully it was understandable for everyone. It's a lot of times when you get a blast email, right, left, or center, I don't care what side it comes from, it's not always completely true, and so it's really great to ask questions. Appreciate it. There was somebody over here first, I think, before. No? Okay, go ahead.
Richard Copperthwaite, hi folks. Franklin County Field Days, curious, any new information on a new site for Franklin County Field Days, or any hope for yet another year of the current site?
We got a senator down there with a love to talk.
Thank you for that question. We are in negotiations, remaining hopeful on that issue. As a matter of fact, I was supposed to meet with someone today, but the state has been very supportive. It appears that it may not be at the same site, but in close proximity, but nothing is finalized on it. You know, everyone wants Franklin County Field Days, but they just don't want it in their backyard because of the noise and so on and so forth. But we are, the board of directors are working real hard with the Agency of Transportation, along with many other agencies, agriculture, and so on and so forth. We're remaining hopeful. We should have an answer, I would think, with it. We recommended this, the legislation has recommended to the board when they met with us that we move ahead and find an attorney for land and so on and so forth, because that's above our pay scale, obviously. So I believe that they've moved forward with that. We've had 2 or 3 names they're looking at putting in RFPs on that process. So it's not done, but it could be in a better place, for example, what I'm saying.
Ma'am?
Yep.
Just state your
Jane
name.
Johnson.
Jane
I'm
Johnson.
in St. Albans City. And I'm concerned about homelessness, which I think we all are. We know it's a problem in Vermont and in Franklin County. And I know, we can build warming shelters, which we should, and homeless shelters, but I'm concerned about a longer-term solution to the problem. And so I'm wondering what you all think the role of government is in that, and what's your strategy for a long-term solution to our homelessness problem?
Do you want to talk?
I can just take a stab that the housing committees are looking at this issue. Obviously, it's very, very important to everybody in the state, and it's a huge problem. Our representative from Fairfax, Ashley Bartley, is the vice chair of the General and Housing Committee in the House, so she would be a great person to interact with on any specific programs that you're concerned about, as well as maybe, I'm not sure who on appropriations deals with housing, but that might be, oh yes, Representative Tiff Bloomley from Chittenden County. So they would be great people. Unfortunately, Ashley's unable to be with us today.
And I would say, in my former committee, Human Services, we dealt with homelessness all the time. And one of the frustrations that there's tripartisan desire to solve this problem. But like a lot of things in government, it gets stuck in the mud. And every year we would have a joint hearing and on homelessness in like the fall before the session. And every year somebody would say, well, we're just starting this. And I'd always be the person to stand up, we're not just starting this. Why are we always back to square one? So I think all of us at least feel the frustration of not moving forward, but there's nobody in that building that doesn't want to solve the problem. It's just a matter of getting everybody on the same page to actually solve the problem. So I know that's not a real great answer, but it's unfortunately the answer.
Can I make one more comment? I did sit on the General Housing Committee for 4 years, and in the time since I was on that committee and now, our actual rate of homelessness has skyrocketed, which everybody is aware of. And some of that is due to individuals who have moved into the state of Vermont over the last 4 years. So they do a point in time count, which has just happened. And I haven't seen those numbers. But when I first sat on general and housing, the number hovered around 800 to 1,000 folks. Now it's well over 3,000, I believe. So, and that includes people who are still being housed in motels, because there are some that are still there, or in other congregate shelters. So I guess we will have to find out more, and maybe at our next legislative breakfast, and that might be something we could talk about.
Joe?
Yeah. But another piece, in the last biennium, there was some exemptions made for municipalities with sewer and water resources to exempt from the 250 process.
Right.
But at the same time, for the communities that don't have that, which is most of Vermont, the process, those who fall within 250 review actually became more, and there was really nothing done with it. Not so much the rules of Act 250, but the expediency. So we got a project that take 2.5 years to get to where they're shovel ready, and that does not help with the homelessness issues. And you can't build housing in most of the state for 30 months. Additionally, that really almost abrogates the ability of small builders to function in Vermont, which I don't think is what we want from a public policy perspective. And so you only end up with larger entities who can pay a mortgage for 30 months without having any income.
So, thank you. Yes, ma'am. Just state your name and what's your question.
Ann Levy, St. Albans City. One of the contributors to the homelessness problem are the mentally ill. We have no state hospital. We desperately need one. And it's really a crime. We have no psychiatrists in Franklin County. People have to travel more than an hour. The whole mental health system is in shambles, and until we address that, a lot of the drug addiction starts as people not trusting the mental health system, so not going and getting medication, or being denied, or not being able to get in, or whatever, and street drugs do a nice job. So until we, some staggering statistics, and it's ironic that I'm going to be quoting from Alvin Bragg, the DA, Manhattan DA, in a speech he gave, an op-ed piece he did for the New York Times last Martin Luther King Day, and he quotes Martin Luther King as Jr. Was stabbed at a public meeting he was speaking, and he didn't press charges because the woman was schizophrenic, and there was no help for her, and a street person, et cetera, et cetera. And Bragg has laid out brilliantly, and I couldn't find I was looking desperately for a list of our current legislators, this group, and their email addresses, and they haven't been updated anywhere that I can find. Joe, you're not on it. So I couldn't send you this article, but if you email me, and I've got a handout for everyone. I'd be happy to send his way of, he says 50% of the people he has incarcerated are mentally ill, and that now the prisons are mental health, are our solution to mental illness. And that's not right. And since 1958, 96% of the psychiatric beds in this country have been closed. And we know our population has grown. There are ways of helping people, but you really need a state hospital for the times people need to be hospitalized, stabilized, and so on. Another aspect obviously of the homelessness issue is the drug addiction. And there's a group, I'm not sure, I don't think they have a name, that wrote a paper to the governor. I think it was 10 or 11 people who are very actively involved, either through organizations or including, I've just forgotten our Commissioner of Health's name, Levine. And they looked at what Vermont does, what best practices seem to be, and how Vermont stacks up with New York and New Hampshire, and it doesn't look good. It's very clear that there are successes when people have not just that quick dry out period, short-term hospitalizations, but step-down programs. And those exist in New York and New Hampshire. Something similar could work for the mentally ill, but we don't even have that 2-week period that people can get into a psychiatric bed and have their meds and so on calibrated, changed, whatever. I could go on forever. There are two very important things I want to say. One is most psychiatric illnesses have a biological base. We've made this strange dichotomy between the mind and the body. Lots of information, lots of research has shown that the gut, when the gut's out of sync, the brain is. Something like 80% of the serotonin that's produced in our body is produced in the gut, not the brain. There are all sorts of issues with medical issues that impact mental health. Those need to come together. You need at least a state hospital, or maybe 4 in each corner of the state. The need is huge, and it impacts not only the individual and their family, but public safety. Unfortunately, Burlington made the international news when 3 Palestinian students walked down the street and were shot by a man who had a long history of mental illness and whose mother said had been decompensating for months and could not get help. I was very thankful, since the street that Mojave Zenit was on, that it was not a Jew who pulled that trigger. We really would have had him. But it's a horrible story. We need to do something. And the last piece to this that I want to briefly say, I'm not being brief, I know that. We have empowered the mentally ill to make all their own decisions. And so the best therapist, the best psychiatrist, the best hospitalization is not going to work if they're the only person who can speak for themselves. And I know I'm going against NAMI and all sorts of advocacy groups as I say this, but some of you know, my daughter's mentally ill. When she's in the mood, she'll say, it's crazy, Mom. My brain is a mess, but I make the decisions. And she's holding on to that right. And just as we have advanced directives for our own health as we become incapacitated or whatever, perhaps someone who's mentally ill, as they improve, could write out what they know about themselves when they're going downhill and how they want to be treated. So the advanced directive for mental illness, but that's a long way down. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. And in my former committee, we dealt with this all the time. There's, I would say, tripartisan, nonpartisan, whatever you want, agreement that there's a problem. And but the problem, we have workforce problem. There's one, but the values of, I think we should have a larger state hospital, more. There's federal laws, and I don't misspeak and say the wrong stuff about the size and all that stuff. And there's also people's different values that smaller is better, and it's not always better because you can't have scale, and the costs, etc. But you had mentioned prisons and, correctional institutions and mental health. And Joe and I just sat through a presentation last week where when the mental institutions closed, the population in the mental institutions obviously went down. And just the same exact time, the prison populations in America went up. And so if you're not wrapping services around these individuals, and not just because it feels good, but in the right way, as you're alluding to, you're not helping it. In prison, in our state, we call them correctional facilities, but they'll tell you they're not equipped to deal with this. So thank you for your points, and I know that everybody up here agrees with you. Thank you.
Let's hope we get that hospital.
Ma'am?
Janet Pell from St. Albans City. And we've all been experiencing for the last week lots of news about Republican cuts in Congress. And we are facing school budgets and town budgets coming up in shortly. We're talking about money in taxes. And so at the last election, there were a lot of promises about no taxes or tax load being low, but there is discussion about increases, at least in the city. So I'm wondering, because we didn't, what is on the table in Montpelier for possible cuts and reduction in services, understanding that you're only in the beginning of the process.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's been just a little bit of discussion, just a little bit of, we haven't gotten into details. But there's a huge awareness of the fact that whatever it is we get from the federal government is potentially at risk. And until we see something more specific, we probably aren't going to go and be able to say anything about it until we know what it is. We do know what, there's all sorts of issues that are going on out there that have an impact on us. The immigration. We have immigrant workers working in our farms, which would probably not function if we didn't have immigrant workers there. We have obviously money. We have come to the end, we're coming to the end of our ARPA money. We had to have it obligated under contract by December of '24, which we primarily did. Doug Farnham is the head of the administration for Chief Recovery Officer, and he's doing a whole lot more than just ARPA. He's doing all the floods and all that other stuff. But we got all the money that we were supposed to get under obligation. So now we have until December of '26 to be able to spend it and finish these projects. The area that was the most at risk was ANR, Agency of Natural Resources, because theirs requires a long lead time. They deal with money, with water, they deal with all kinds of things that are complicated that take time. But we are in good shape with the ARPA money. Then there's the BIF money, or the bipartisan infrastructure law, that has other money that Pat Leahy gave tons of money to us to do. That goes to like 27. And then there's the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, I think is what it is. That's another one that Pat Leahy funded. Those could be monies that could be, clawed back by the federal government. So we do know that this stuff is about to come to us, or could come to us, and we are aware of it. The FEMA money, We had floods here in St. Albans. We had 2 instances here in 2011 in St. Albans and in Fairfield and Fletcher. I mean, wiped out the Fletcher Road between Fairfield and Fletcher. We had the lake situation with people down in the lake were just inundated, camps. So we are familiar with the needs for FEMA. I mean, not just us, but everyone. I mean, we won't even go into the other parts of the country where we know they're just been it's like a bomb has exploded. So this money is important to us, and we have no idea how this is going to work.
Yep.
You know, we do have a delegation that will be there to advocate for us, but it is worrying. I mean, you know, Jane, you got a really good point, because we depend on a lot of federal money.
Absolutely. And, I mean, the public safety program that, at least that I've read about, that Governor Scott has proposed, could result in increased incarceration. And as of last year, that was $90,000 a year per inhabitant. I mean, that there are costly solutions to the issues that we had at the time of the election, before we knew about these other cuts and loss of money. So as you are contemplating this, and the fact that we may have less money and have issued things that we relied on the federal government to help support payment of, what are your thoughts as to what might be reduced, what programs might be reduced in order to keep taxes down?
So to answer that question, Lynn alluded to this earlier. We can't tell you what's on the table to be cut or anything. First of all, we're not the legislative majority. But Franklin County, our delegation has a long track record of fighting to make sure the county is taken care of. Democrat, Republican, independent, progressive, doesn't matter. We always stick together. We don't go down there and think in partisan nature. Most people in Montpelier don't think in a partisan nature. Once you walk in a building, for most people, the labels go off. It's way too early in the session to be able to say, these are absolutely what's going to happen. It's too early for that. We're all committed to working with all of our partners across the aisle and advocates and others that come in to talk about what's the best for Vermont. And I'll just give you an anecdote that hopefully explains where we come from. My first vice chair was a progressive. I'm clearly a Republican. We used to work together on the budget. She'd always say, James, I'm a progressive. I'm supposed to be spending money. You're a Republican. You're supposed to be saving money. But I was always the one asking for more. Because we don't oppose spending money. We oppose spending money thoughtlessly. We want to make sure that the money's spent on things that are actually going to solve a problem. And we go into our conversations like that. But nobody, I mean, if somebody comes to you as a legislator or anybody and has a concrete plan today, that should tell you that they're not open enough to listen to their colleagues while they're down there for the rest of the session. We have to have open, honest conversations. If I come in and say, this is what's going to happen, and I don't listen to them, then we failed you. And our job is to listen and to talk to each other and listen to you guys and try to figure out the best policy moving forward. So, next question. Yes, sir.
Steve Ryan, Georgia. Global Warming Solutions Act has unattainable goals, and it allows private organizations to sue the state when those standards aren't met. In New England, on the grid, renewables contribute about 8% on the average. Is there any chance that this act will be repealed?
Brandon?
I think there is a chance that it will be repealed or altered in some way. The concerns are we can very often make guesses, estimates, and hopes of what we're going to achieve, but one of the things we have to do is build in every bill, not just this particular bill, but every bill. Certainly one of my priorities this year is to add accountability. Accountability means looking back at what we've done and saying, did it make a difference? And how does it affect what we're doing today going forward? We didn't have real accountability there, except in terms of adding things like allowing third parties or individuals to sue the state in the event that we don't meet certain goals. And in terms of the goals of the Global Warming Solutions Act, we're not going to meet those goals as stated. Suing us and suing the state to force the state to do something, meaning to force you to spend more money on something that isn't working, doesn't strike me as being the best thing to do. What it does, though, say is that we need to go back when we pass something and make sure it's working as intended, and if it's not, then alter it. I think that's the more likely course, in addition to eliminating, though, the individual right of action to sue. Vermont has always been at the forefront of environmental issues because we want to protect the environment that we live in. At the same time, we can't erect 1,000-foot fences to protect us from the air coming from New York or New Hampshire or Quebec or Massachusetts. And therein lies the problem. There's a limit as to what we can do. Setting an example of what we can do is not necessarily cost effective for Vermont citizens.
Thank you. Over here. I'm gonna get a donut while you're talking, but not because I'm not listening. I'm just really hungry.
I'll take one. Liz Gamache, City of St. Albans. My question is around rural healthcare. And I guess it's, I want to share an observation, but I'm really interested in asking you all for thoughts on where we're headed and how we as citizens can work to influence you and how you influence state healthcare policy. I think rural healthcare is always a challenge, and I'm all for organizations operating effectively and efficiently with high quality standards, of course. And I'm very appreciative of NMC. That's one of the reasons I live in the city of St. Albans, to be close to a hospital. I'm very concerned about accessibility to healthcare, and my question really centers around how policy is being made in the Green Mountain Care Board. I don't get it. I really don't get it. I know there was a report that came out recently that was contentious in terms of the results about next steps for the Vermont healthcare system, but from where you all sit, could one or two of you share how healthcare policy is being set and how you play a role in that for the state so that we have accessible, affordable healthcare?
I'll say it, Penny or Alan will follow up, and I just say it real quick that.
Yes, thanks for the question. And our healthcare committee is dealing with that this coming week. Thursday we have Green Mountain Care Board testifying, and we're all worried about our rural hospitals. The Wyman survey came out, and we're in the process of reading it. It's I think it's 250 pages. That's my homework from now until Thursday. But everybody up here wants to keep our rural hospitals the way they are. But somehow we got to make it affordable. You're dealing with, UVM hospital. So we've got to take a lot of testimony, but our committee I'm on, are all saying we need our rural care centers. So how we go about that and how we come to a compromise to keep everybody happy and open, it's going to be a challenge. So hopefully we can do that.
And I'd also say that I appreciate NC, and I also appreciate proximity to the UVM Medical Center. I think that's really important also.
I would say Lisa's going to finalize it, but one thing that we have engaged with the hospital president and also with UVM because of cuts. And one thing that we, or some of us at least, have advocated for the Green Mountain Care Board is to re-look at how they're regulating. I'm not sure that revenue is the way you regulate. And we had long conversations with people that really don't understand. For example, there was a protest the other day about CEO pay. I'm not saying that's not valid, but they said if the CEO doesn't get paid more, they'd be able to do dialysis. And I was like, that's not the problem. If you're regulating revenue and they cannot make any more, it doesn't matter what they spend. They should be regulating perhaps profit or profit margin, right?
I appreciate that observation.
But that's a communication we're going to have. Lisa will finalize this.
Thanks. As James mentioned, we had at least 2 meetings, one at NMC and one with UVMMC. So this delegation has been engaging ever since the Wyman report came out. Sure. And the Rural Caucus has also had one public hearing where we've invited in all the hospital CEOs, and some came in person, some were there via Zoom. That was back on December 4th. So our members in the Rural Caucus, which numbers about 50 or so legislators, could hear from the CEOs about the challenges that are facing their hospitals. So we are engaging, we don't have any answers, and the more we learn, the better informed we're going to be to make those decisions. Thank you for the question.
Senator Brock, I guess we're gonna.
Just a comment overall, and this is particularly true, I think, in healthcare. Legislators aren't necessarily experts on healthcare, but what we ought to be experts in is asking questions, and asking probing questions as to why. One of the things that strikes me about hospitals and where we stand right now, a couple things kind of leap out. That the solution to getting the revenue costs down, which was a complaint from the Green Mountain Care Board, was to eliminate dialysis in 3 or 4 rural hospitals. That just did not strike me as a very credible solution, only because it said to me, it raised the question in my mind, did they say eliminate dialysis because the public would scream? But if they said eliminated certain administrative overhead costs, we would say nothing. Every time I look at our medical situation in Vermont, particularly when the cry is increased technology is the reason for increased cost, better technology and more expensive technology. And then I think every time I walk into Best Buy or Costco and I look at the high-tech, large-screen television sets, the price every time I go in one of those stores is cheaper than it was the last time I went in there. And every place that uses technology in America, the prices go down. At Global Foundries, for example, when it was just, as it was leaving IBM, one of the things that I learned in visiting them was that every time they make a bid on a contract, even for a continuing customer, their price has to be lower than it was the year before because of the pressures of the economy. And that seems to hold true in every industry in America except healthcare. And I want to know why, and those are my questions. And I'm going to be asking more and more questions of why and more questions of accountability as to why those costs are continuing to rise when the costs elsewhere in our economy per capita are continuing to go down.
Thank you, Senator. I would ask you to probe on, and I'm sure you're already doing this, the impacts of our changing demographics and aging population,
Sure.
which I think is different.
The aging population certainly is a factor.
Right. And some of the other things we talked about.
But it's not aging faster than the increase in cost. And when you start comparing the two, they're not comparable.
Well, it's a question that comes to mind for me that relates to many of the other issues that are brought up. My personal feeling is that part of the solution is growth in the state of Vermont, which relates back to housing, which would help provide more people of various generations to be able to support the tax base and the participate in the programs we need.
You have a point, and there are a number of things that are being done right now to focus on the issue of growth. We're concerned with an aging population, and we're not necessarily replacing those populations at the prime working years. And the population of prime working years is where there's tremendous demand. We can't fill the jobs that we have right now. Very different than it used to be perhaps 10 or 15 years ago, in which we were circulating, looking for additional businesses. Right now, we're looking for people.
Yep.
And we do have initiatives underway to do that, such as change in military retirement taxation, for example, to bring in people at prime working age who have skills and who typically have families and kids in order to add to our workforce. And that's just one of many things that we're doing.
And so I'll let Principal Brannigan over here go last.
He's always doing that because when he was in grade school, I was the principal of the school. There's one comment I wanted to make, and well, first I want to say all of Senator Brock's comments were right on, and I know you know that. But I want to say, regarding to every question we are receiving this morning, number one, we are members of a minority. There are 56 of us out of 150. We are in the minority. We don't have a lot of influence. But the place that this delegation has the most influence is in our committees. So Ways and Means, Appropriations, Senate Finance, in those small committees where you have smaller groups of people, that's where we build influence. So we try to listen, try to be, understanding of other people's points of view, and we look for compromise. And that's how we are working. You asked how we are making an effort in health care policy. It's how we make an effort in the transportation policy and the tax policy and the school bills that we get in, which are, someone asked about what's happening with taxing this year, bouncing off what the comments were during the election. Jan, I think it was you.
Well, it is, I mean, there was, the Republicans in Washington, I mean, which you are not, are talking about cutting Medicare, Medicaid, FEMA, everything, which of course is going to influence us because
Republicans in Washington.
Right.
We are different.
Yes, I just said
Issues
that.
are different.
So
and
what
we
we're-
represent
Wait a
Vermont.
minute, Lynn, I just said that you were different. But they are cutting, which is going to have implications for all of you in figuring
We'll
it out.
see
So-
how far they can go.
Yeah,
And along with the fact that, you know, about accountability, looking at taxes, that, and, you know, I mean, what Republicans ran on was, you know, no new taxes, reduction in taxes. So at some point in time, the reality is there may be a need to cut services or programs in Vermont. And so my question was, what is your thinking? I mean, I appreciate the compromise, everything you're saying, Carolyn. And I mean, I'm not suggesting that you're going to be irresponsible or make random cuts, but, you know, I think, Jamie, where you're coming from, what is your philosophy? What's the most important things?
so before we move on, because there's other people, there's a guy in the second row, the nice gentleman, but I'll just say, no, McCarthy's is after. So anyway, the answer to that is actually very simple. Even if you cut, which we're not necessarily advocating for, it's how. You could spend all kinds of money, and we have a history of spending all kinds of money for very poor results. It's that conversation is the hard one to have with anybody. Well, how do you get better results in a more efficient way? I always say efficient and effective. That's the hard conversation to have, because that's the one where I find most people just start going like this. And so, gentlemen, yes.
Yes, good morning.
Name and...
My name is Doug Watkin,
Yeah.
St. Albans Town. Thanks for the coffee. My question has to do with the undocumented workers in this state. And of course, throughout America, there's tremendous pressure on the undocumented right now because of the election. Well, there always was, but it's increased a lot. I'm a retired dairy person, and you all know, you take the undocumented out of Vermont, you ain't got dairy. You've got about a day to get rid of 1,000 cows real quick. So I'm just curious what's happening with this committee and what's happening in Montpelier with the governor, what he thinks about this. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We understand, believe me, I always tell people in my store, Mexicans are my best customers. Very, very great. They're hard workers, but we don't set that policy. So we'll Jack.
Okay, first of all, thank all of you for the hard work you do, even though I'm a bleeding heart liberal Democrat.
Can you tell us your name? We know
Oh,
your name.
I'm sorry, I'm Jack McCarthy, St. Albans Town. As a 50-year educator, retired, I saw the governor's proposal of 5 districts in the state. And I want to know your thoughts about that, but I want to make a comment first. In my experience, whenever you consolidate, the teacher unions and the support staff unions, and in Burlington, they have administrative unions, believe it or not. The unions throughout, like, let's say you consolidate to a certain place, all the unions in that certain place will want to get the highest pay of a former district or whatever. So to consolidate might in the future save money, but temporarily will cost a lot of money, because all the unions will, and there's legislative laws about bargaining in good faith, and collective bargaining is a difficult issue. And I've been on either side. When I was a teacher, I was in charge of a strike. And as a principal, I was trying to get the cost down. And as a superintendent, even more so. So what are your thoughts about the consolidation from around 62 institutions, either supervisory unions or large city school districts? I think there are around 62 of those in Vermont, going down to 5. And I come from Delaware before we lived here. 30 years ago we moved here. Delaware had 19 school districts. People say, oh, that's great, you can save money, they only have 19 superintendents. No, they had hundreds of area directors and assistant superintendents, whatever. The work has to be done by somebody. Your thoughts about the consolidation idea of down to 5?
So the conversations we've had in this delegation, and other people are feel free to jump in after and contradict me, but even among all parties in the legislature seem to agree. We're not going to make super strong statements on that because we think the process should be able to unfold, and the legislative process should go without us trying to. We obviously have influence. We have opinions. I have strong opinions. Former public school teacher, I have opinions. But what's always happened, and being in education for years or just being in public life, is emotions and stuff get involved, and we get to a point on any issue, whether it's this one, healthcare, homelessness, etc. And we don't allow those conversations to happen. And Representative Kornheiser, which you guys would know, in the spring, she had said something, and she got kind of lambasted in the paper, and I was like, no, she's right. In the legislative process, we can't have open and honest brainstorming because there's people, organizations, individuals, etc., get very, very, very defensive or very emotional and even attack. So right, left, or center, I think this is a point in time where we need to sit back and let the process roll out, let the testimony come in, have real conversations. We're going to formulate stronger views on this as we go along, but we all have them. But if we, what I'm not going to do, and I think we've all agreed, is we're not going to undercut it, and we're also not going to say it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. There's something in between, but we want the process to really play out. Lisa was going to go, and then Joe.
Just very quickly, Jack, thank you for bringing that up. The day that you all heard the governor's proposal was the first time we heard it as well. So 5 is a starting number. Think about any bill or anything that comes to the legislature. You start with one thing, you sign on to it, you're really excited about it, and by the time it gets to the end, when it gets passed, it's pretty different than what you started out with. So as James said, we're going to watch this unfold, but we're not only going to watch it unfold. Our committees, every single one of our committees has been tasked with a little piece of this education reform plan, and each committee is going to have some jurisdiction and some input into it. Obviously, the 2 tax committees in the House and the Senate and the 2 education committees in the House and the Senate are going to bear the brunt of it, but the rest of us, for instance, my committee, Government Operations, is going to be, and we just learned this 3 days ago, is going to be in charge of talking about how the districts are going to be redrawn, because we usually deal with reapportionment for election purposes. So that came as a surprise to me, but it makes sense because that's what my committee has expertise in. So every committee is going to work on something, and it's going to be a process. So I'll turn that over to the next person.
And I will say, before I let Joe go, I was heartened, I suppose. Usually if the governor speaks, the speaker and the pro tem will have something that's kind of, partisan in return, or vice versa, right? If Jill says something, the governor's like, On this issue, they've all, in their press conferences, have been very, let's work together. So let's keep our fingers crossed, let the process go, and hopefully nobody, we're all going to have opinions, but hopefully it doesn't get undermined, that the end mission should be you know, as a former educator myself, and you obviously know a heck of a lot about education, should be about the kids. And so that should be the goal. Joe?
Well, you used my comments, James. So
that's what I did.
There's the fundamental difference, and there's general concurrence between the administration, the pro tem, and the speaker, and that hasn't been the case in previous sessions.
Yes, ma'am.
So my name is Tara Sweet. I'm now a St. Albans City resident and lived in Fletcher for 25 years prior to that. So
Traitor.
I know, sorry. I'm a former school board chair, school board member, and I was also on the Vermont School Boards Association. So that's my background. But Jack said a lot of what I was going to say. But one thing I would urge you guys to also look at, and you just kind of touched on it, Representative Yukido, is that the redistricting. I mean, the Champlain Valley one is 34,000 and the rest are all 10 or 11. It seemed very inadequate to me, especially because Franklin County is a much different beast than Chittenden County as far as how our counties work, how we're operated, the ruralness. So that was one of my comments, was to look at how that all was going to interchange. I mean, if we're going to redistrict, they should all be similarly sized, in my opinion, versus having one that's super large and the rest all smaller.
And and so Lynn wants to talk, but we'll make sure we're not getting too prescriptive as far as what.
Yeah, we're not gonna get into the actual details of what the governor proposed, because obviously this is like just an introduction.
Oh yeah, there's gonna be so much that's gonna come out of this. There's so many questions still to be answered.
And I've been involved in school issues probably since the day I moved here. I mean, I've been here since 1973, and I got involved in community college coming to Franklin County. I got involved in Title I because I had a daughter at the city school. I got involved in the school board. I got elected, didn't get elected. I got appointed to the BFA board, spent a long, long time trying to go and make that into a union high school along with other people. And it took us 30 years of really serious, metal to the pedal or pedal to really get that to the finish line. And that is something that was discussed for years before any of the rest of us got involved. So I've seen this up close. And I'm now the legislative trustee at the state college system. I'm the chairman of the board, which I got by default after all that whole thing blew up in 2020. I was the vice chair, and now I'm the chair. Very similar situations, actually, to the K-12. Overbuilt, declining students, the demographics, the whole thing. But I remember when I first got elected in 2008, I went to a Champlain Valley Supervisory Union Association, or whatever, that probably Jack was part of it then, at that time, or soon after that. And these divisions that they created are following the associations that the supervisors, the superintendents have. That was their starting point. But I remember going to that, and the superintendents at that Champlain Valley Supervisory Union Association, they had 4 counties along the Champlain Valley. And they pointed out to us that 2/3 of the students in the state are in these 4 counties, and 1/3 of the supervisory unions are in those counties. And you sit down and you start to realize that means that 1/3 of the students are in the other 10 counties, and they have twice as many supervisory unions.
Lynn, we're getting too far.
No, but let me just say that that's the reality. We are, they're all different. But the other thing that I went to after I got off the BFA board, before I got back on as a school board member, is I went to a thing that Richard Kate ran, and he was then the Commissioner of Education, had these all over the state. And I don't know, maybe, again, Jack might have been there. He was talking about, did we want a statewide contract? Well, the deal with that is that we're all going to have to raise everything up to what South Burlington has, which is incredibly expensive for most people. How's that going to work? We're the size of Rochester, New York. We have state employees that are state employees and contracted, whether you live in Canaan or you live in South Burlington. So we have a lot of things to think about.
So we're going to, Mr. Henderson had his hand up first, so introduce yourself, tell us about your organization.
Okay, thank you. My name's Kent Henderson. I'm a resident of the town of Georgia. I'm a retired dairy exclusive veterinarian, but I'm representing, I sit on a board of the Federation of Vermont Lakes and Ponds, and then you'll recognize me as the chair of the Friends of Northern Lake Champlain. I worked with you a long time in that regard. All I want to do is bring your attention to a couple bills. Like we look for water quality bills. There are two that I think are of interest that we've really depended on your nonpartisan support in the past, and I just want to bring them to your attention. The first one is H86. That's a bill that was actually introduced last year by Senator Ann Watson, who is now the chair of Senate Energy and Environment. Did I get that title? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. Last year, this bill sat on the wall. Now she's the chair of that committee. She's going to bring it off the wall and bring it in for comment later in the week. This is a bill that is going to take into account public safety, but it's going to take into account the management of the amount of road salt that's used on Vermont roads. Right, this bill was actually developed with oversight from ANR and VTrans, with expert testimony from Lake Champlain Basin Program and Sea Grant. The idea is that in order to preserve a liability protection for people that are in the business of spreading salt, there will be a certification program that will include education and record keeping that will tie into liability protection for those ones that are doing the application. Right now, VTrans actually follows a national standards through EPA, but that is not the case for municipalities and for private concerns. There's no opportunity. This wants to present an opportunity for that. And like you said over and over again, there's going to be so many changes and so many things brought into this. It doesn't do me any good to describe this in detail today. It'll go along. But I can say that you will see this in the House Environment Committee with Amy Sheldon. That's where the number came from, H86. I expect the Senate version, it could be out today. I looked this morning and didn't see it, but it'll be out shortly. But before it gets to money committees, it's going to go to those natural resource committees and the transportation committees. So I was hoping to see Representative Walker here today, and I will. And this will go through his committee before it goes on to the money committees. Yes.
Matt he has another meeting this morning, but I know he'll love to talk to you.
Yes. Okay. No, we'll get together on that. The other bill I'd like to draw your attention to is S24. That concerns stormwater. I've already contacted most of you about the fact that the property transfer tax portion that goes into the Clean Water Fund, which actually makes up about a third of the money that we have to spend in the Clean Water Fund, that sunsets next year. This bill will extend that sunset out another 10 years. That's a part of the bill that I'm that we'll be working for, and you'll hear more from me about. There are other, like all other bills, there are other things in it that we're going to have to talk about as it goes on. I think that the senator heard a lot of complaints from people that are trying to address the 3-acre stormwater permit and asking for extensions and asking for money to help support that. In the bill right now, there's a request to extend that 3-acre permit out another 5 years. As an advocate for clean water, who's seen what the Lakeshore residents did with the passage of that legislation in 2014, what the farming community did with the passage of the RAPs in 2015, we knew that it would take longer to get acceptance of the 3-acre permit, so we put it out 10 years, and now we're being asked for another 5 years. So that's a story to be continued.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
That's all my.
Amy and then Zach.
So Amy Brewer, I am the Franklin Grand Isle Tobacco Prevention Coalition, work at the hospital. I'm going to give you lots of data in February when I have the local data, but I wanted to share a couple things. One, as we're talking about healthcare and healthcare savings, please remember that most people start using nicotine in adolescence, and then the cost of someone who uses nicotine, cigarettes, or whatever throughout their life, that increases their healthcare costs. So the work that we're doing in adolescence is a healthcare prevention, healthcare savings activity. So I just want to share that. The other thing I want to share is, as always, in February on the 11th, we'll be bringing students to the State House to talk to all of you. They'll be talking to you about what they see. They are asking you through that process to listen to them and to find ways to act to continue to protect them and their peers. And I think that was the majority of what I wanted to share today. We'll have the Youth Risk Behavior Survey at the SU level in the next, hopefully, couple of weeks, and I'll share that with you at our next legislature.
Thank you so much. Zach?
Zach Scheffler, I had a question about Berkshire, Vermont, for Representative Hango.
She lives there, so she can tell you something.
So, advisors to our Republican presidential administration have been in the news lately, attending extremist political conferences in Germany, making TV appearances.
Can I just stop you there?
No.
Well, there's a reason I'm going to say this, because that person has nothing to do with us.
Well, and at the same time, a member was elected to the Vermont Republican Committee, or Republican Party in Berkshire. Ryan Roy is an avowed, recognized, out and proud, and interviewed neo-Nazi. And he's now obtained a position of Justice of the Peace in Berkshire. I was curious, because for me, this seems like an unprecedented level of extremism in the county Republican Party. And I was just curious if you could explain how this came to happen in your Republican Party here in Franklin County.
Sure, I'll take that question. Thanks for the question, Zach. So, first of all, Justice of the Peace is an elected position, so this gentleman in question has been elected by the public to be a JP. Secondly, the Republican Party is very different from your elected Republican representatives and senators. We are totally separate. Unlike what I have learned about the Democratic Party, we don't have candidates that are put up by the Republican Party necessarily. There are folks who identify as Republicans who are active in the state Republican Party, who advocate for or who support, either monetarily or sign waving or throwing fundraisers for. Those folks exist. In the town of Berkshire, doesn't exist. We have not been able to have a quorum of our town Republican committee in recent years to reorganize the town because we just don't have enough members. I operate very independently of the Republican Party in the town of Berkshire, as well as in the state. So I'm not sure what else to say to you. The gentleman in question.
And Joe will follow up on that real quick as the county chair.
The gentleman in question is not someone I know personally.
Well, the gentleman in question also is not a member of the state committee, so that's a misstatement. As far as how this county functions, I mean, most of the delegation is here, and I don't think you're seeing behavior from us collectively that would be consistent with some of the stuff you see in the national news. So.
Maybe this speaks a little bit to the point as a migrant worker.
Can you raise your hand and then I called on you. So can you What's your name?
I'm Catherine Marin. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, business owner. My husband is a teacher at City School. Just a comment about the migrant workers we didn't really address. I think this speaks to collectively, like, keeping our communities safe from the rhetoric nationally, which I think is important. So, like, how are you helping support migrant workers in the community, women in the community, people of color in the community, with the national narrative? Like, we can't deny that's what's happening. So how
I'll
are we
answer that
keeping
question.
members of our community safe?
I'll answer that question for you. It's very simple. First of all, you can look at any of us, and Zach knows us, so this is
I know most of
okay, so this is a narrative that's false. We have nothing to do with them. We never have. We don't even have anything to do with the state party. We're very protective in Franklin County to make sure that we have nothing to do with the people that you guys are referencing. We have gone out of our way to make sure that we don't. We represent Franklin County. And I see that it's a giggle here, but
I'm not giggling,
no, Zach is, but we don't subscribe to extremism. If we want to talk about extremism, there's plenty in the Democratic side too. We could go down a litany, but we're not going to, because that's not what we're here for. We don't look at things as Republican and Democrat. We don't look at national. We are Franklin County legislators looking out for Franklin County citizens. And, you know, we have done nothing to lead anybody to believe that we have any extremist views.
I didn't say that.
But I want to make that clear since the topic keeps coming up. Yes, ma'am. And this will be the last question because it's almost time to go.
Heather Kelly, St. Albans Town. The words are great, but everyone on the panel today ran that Democrats are bad. That was the platform. And as a Democrat, myself, my family, my friends, we have zero representation in Franklin County. So majority, minority, we have nobody. So it'd be nice to hear actual words to comfort us that someone is going to take care of.
So there's two things. Randy wants to say something and I'll say something. I can say from my own experience that with us, anybody who did, first of all, we've never run on not liking Democrats, like our Democrats, and that's not true at all. We've always run, none of us feel that way. Most of us have very close friends that are Democrats and like more of the Democrats in Montpelier than we like Republicans. We don't function that way. That's something that somebody's made up. That's not the way we function. Also, every one of us is open to anybody, regardless if you openly opposed us in the legislature. That's not always the case, whether it's with the other Republicans or with a lot of Democrats. We do not have that track record. So if you have a representative that's a different party, I would encourage everybody to say, it's not James the Republican, it's James. And I represent your voices as best as I can. My voting record's pretty down the middle of the road. It's a little to the center right, but there's people center left, there's far left and far right. But Randy's going to take this because he's going to speak eloquently.
I don't know how eloquently, but bear in mind when you look at the representation that you have in Franklin County, a great many of us, perhaps the majority of the legislators, are R/Ds. And that means that they ran effectively in the election, but the results of the primary election caused us to win both Republican and Democrat primaries, and we have on our name not just R behind it, but R/Ds. And this is not the first time that that's happened.
Lisa, did you have something?
Yeah, I did. I just really want you all to understand that I represent all of my constituents and work very hard to establish relationships with various Democrats throughout the House and the Senate. And I feel like I have a very good working relationship with most folks in the General Assembly, and that's 180 people. I also want you to understand that the reason that we Republicans were given so many leadership positions in the House and the Senate this year is not because anyone was forced to do that. Remember, the Democrats still have a majority. We were chosen to be vice chairs or ranking members because the Democrats trusted us to work with them. And that is really important. We worked very hard to build those relationships, and we earned the trust of our colleagues across the aisle. And today, I am here to tell you that I am willing to work with anyone, progressive Democrat, Republican, and Independent, and I have done so for the last 6 years. So I really hope that you all can trust in us, that we're going to try to make this process work regardless of what's happening at the national level. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just wrap that up, is that if you go to Montpelier or talk to anybody that's an elected official, you will be hard pressed to find somebody that says we don't work well with others. Franklin County has a reputation as being some of the most open-minded legislators there are. Our voting records can span the spectrum. There's a lot of things that people will say, oh, James, you voted for this left-leaning thing. No, I just voted for a thing. That's not how we as an entity operate. We're very, like I said, we're very protective of the brand, so to speak, in Franklin County because we don't want to be those people. There are extremists everywhere. There's extremist Democrats, progressives, independents, people that are not political at all that are extremists. And there's great people across the aisle of all different stripes. And I would encourage people who think Republican and Democrat, yes, no, to really reconsider that and think about people as individuals because that's how we're going to move forward. If we put up these walls between each other on such arbitrary things as letters. In fact, by the way, I'll tell you, 20 years ago, I was like, we should take letters off from the ballot. I can't stand partisan politics. They tried in North Carolina, they got sued and they lost. You have to have a letter on there. Just don't come into things thinking that it's like Republicans evil, Democrats good, or Democrats evil, Republicans good. That's just not life. It's just not life, and it's certainly not Franklin County life.
It wasn't November.
No, it wasn't. So, ma'am, we gotta get going. That was our last question, but we really appreciate everyone coming today. And I would just encourage everybody to be open-minded and reach out to us for anything. You'll find that we're extremely amenable to having conversations, and we're here to work for Franklin County. That's it. Thank you.